On this, let's bring in outgoing Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. And good to have you. Thanks for spending some time with us to talk about this, Mr. Scheer.
Thanks for having me on the show to give me the opportunity.
Yeah, you bet. So, we just heard from Peter MacKay. He says it's crass, it's using the tragedy for political purposes. What do you think?
Well, I think there are two very unfortunate things here. One is that the Prime Minister is choosing to do this at this time, with the House of Commons effectively suspended when the whole nation is gripped by the coronavirus and the response to it. We don't believe that while there is no opportunity for parliamentarians to hold the government to account, to question the wisdom of their policies, that this is not the time to be making important policy changes. In addition, to do so quickly off the heels of a tragedy in Nova Scotia, a tragedy which was committed by an individual who did not have a valid license. Therefore, all the firearms that he owned were illegal. We believe that this is unacceptable. Conservatives believe in effective gun control that keeps firearms out of the hands of dangerous offenders, not simply asking law-abiding Canadians to follow more rules or more laws.
Yeah, and interesting though to note, I mean, in terms of the Nova Scotia shooter, two of the long guns that he used, yes, were illegal, but are also on that list to ban. But what would you say for Canadian, and certainly on the heels of any shooting tragedy here in the United States or anywhere, there is a bubble up of concern about gun violence in general. Not surprising that people would say now is the time to do exactly that.
Well, again, just to reinforce the point, because the shooter in Nova Scotia did not have a license, that means that all his firearms were illegal. And obviously, unfortunately, tragically, that did not prevent this person evil. And what we're saying is that, yes, anytime there's a tragedy, we need to look at what happened. We have major questions as to why it took so long for the RCMP to issue warnings, how this individual obtained what seems to be very authentic looking uniforms. Of course, we should be asking questions about what happened and what lessons could be learned. But the overwhelming majority of homicides committed in Canada are done so with illegal firearms, smuggled firearms, guns coming in from the United States and other countries. We believe that it's lazy, ineffective government to take all the people who follow all the rules in Canada and say, here are some more rules for you to follow. And meanwhile, organize criminals and drug dealers who don't care which laws they're breaking, that we don't address them. And what Conservatives are saying is, when it comes to precious resources that police departments have, let's go after the criminals. Let's have more inspections at our border. Let's have bigger task forces that can penetrate criminal organizations. And let's get those illegal guns off the street. That is what will actually make our communities safer.
Right. And when Canadians are polled on this, Mr. Scheer, I mean, yes, they say, you can go after the guns and gangs, and there's initiatives underway to go after guns and gangs, and some border input on that over the past couple of years. But when you look at the polls that come in, 61% of Canadians in one of the most recent polls said that they'd support a complete ban on assault rifles and handguns. And that number jumps to 75% when you're talking about just a simple assault rifle ban.
Well, what we're looking at is what experts in police organizations tell us. They tell us that what they're dealing with on the streets of Toronto, what they're dealing with on the streets of Vancouver, are smuggled firearms. There are people who are sawing off shotguns and sawing off rifles. There are people who are obtaining illegal handguns and bringing them into Canada. That is what is leading to the largest number of homicides. And we have a great deal of sympathy and compassion for people who have been affected by violent crime. We continue to believe the evidence shows that when you can stop the flow of illegal firearms, have stronger background checks to make sure that people with, for example, a history of violent activity in their life, or with mental health issues that would be a red flag in terms of future behavior, that is where government should be concentrated. That will actually have a better impact on making our streets safer. What the Liberals are so famous for doing is getting the gestures. They look for gestures and they don't look at the substance. So again, it's lazy government to ask a whole bunch of people who are already following all the rules to follow more rules, to get that drug dealer who's transporting cocaine from one part of the community to another to care about what type of classification his smuggled firearm is, I mean, it's ridiculous. We'd rather see those resources and that time and energy, those people off the street and those guns out of our communities.
Well, the ban has gone into place today, effective immediately. They didn't need legislation to do it, but they will need legislation if they want to implement a buyback program, which they say is going to be coming. And so there, I mean, one would think that there would be an opportunity. Would you support at that point, whether it's at a reduced, House of Commons or a virtual session, would you support the buyback to this?
Well, as you point out, they made this announcement through regulations, which means that there's no vote in the House of Commons. But even so, when governments make major policy changes, to do so when the House of Commons has been effectively shut down by the government, I might add, eliminating 80% of the parliamentary sittings where we don't really have the opportunity to question the government for things unrelated to the coronavirus. We believe that is undemocratic for them to proceed in that way. We generally don't support liberal measures, empty gestures that go after law-abiding Canadians when those resources could be put to good use at our borders and in our police detachments. That's what Conservatives will continue to push for: stronger background checks, more effective inspections, and task force to get those guns off our street. That's what we would support. That is what we will be calling on the government to do.
And before I let you go, Mr. Scheer, just because people ask this all the time, I mean, for those that are not in favor of assault rifles, they would say, why have an assault rifle? Why have a military-style weapon anyway, even if it's legal and looked after? Why have it?
Well, there are millions of Canadians who enjoy sports shooting, who enjoy recreational activities, the legal recreational activities with their firearms. And what we're saying is that the onus is really on the government to explain how this will be effective. And all the evidence shows that it won't be. So what we're saying is it's not a question of whether or not some Canadians do or don't want these types of things to be legal. It's what is the most effective way for the government to keep our community safe. And we don't believe, again, to picture all the millions of Canadians who have their valid licenses, who follow safe storage laws, who call to get appropriate permits when they transport their firearms, who go to and from ranges. They follow all the rules. And now we're saying we're going to ask all those people to follow a few more rules. And anybody who thinks that that's going to get dangerous weapons off our street or prevent the types of tragedies that we've seen, the evidence is just not there. This individual in Nova Scotia did not have a license. Every single firearm he had was already illegal. And Justin Trudeau should not be using a very emotional tragedy as an excuse to get a policy change put in that he's long, his ideological commitment to this is long-standing, and especially at a time when Parliament isn't sitting.
We will leave it there. Andrew Scheer, thank you very much for weighing in this